Confidence. We all want it. But what if you don't have it? Confidence. Is it something that you can learn, or is it just what you're born with? Is it like a muscle that you can grow, or is it like your height and you're just stuck with what you have? Today we're going to look at one person which has two unique characteristics which make him an ideal subject for this video. He did something really hard and scary, and he talked a lot about it, so you can understand his thinking. I mean, there's even an Oscar-winning documentary about it.
Does it feel different to be up there without a rope?
It's obviously like much higher consequence. I've thought about all cap like for years, and every year I'm like, that's really scary. I'll never be content unless I at least put in the effort. El Cap is the most impressive wall on Earth.
It's 3,200 feet of sheer granite. It's the center.
And I hear you, man, he's just built different. This extreme stuff, what does he got to do with me? He's out there climbing mountains and I'm just here stressing out about delivering a presentation to my boss. These two things have nothing in common. And that's where you're wrong.
It's got everything in common. The moment of truth, the climb, the speech, whatever. That is the final 1% of a long road. It is on the other 99% where you build your confidence, and the way you build it is the same, regardless if you're going to free solo the El Capitan or you're getting ready to hand a feedback sandwich to someone. The El Capitan project took Alex 8 years from idea to success. He's been climbing all his life and he changed everything around it, living in a van close to the mountains, climbing and training every day. He hasn't gained the confidence to climb the El Capitan on that morning because he pumped himself up in front of the mirror. He had been gaining it for 20 years, one day at a time. It's the same for us. Preparation is, in my opinion, the most important thing you can do to increase your confidence, and that's the number one thing on our list today.
So sometimes that confidence just comes from feeling super fit. Sometimes that confidence comes through preparation and rehearsal. But I mean, there's always something that makes you feel ready.
Here's Alex saying that dealing with fear is not about overpowering it per se, but about working the problem and preparing until it's not so scary anymore.
That moment of, oh, this is not so scary anymore, exists for anything if you're willing to put in the work. The only question is, how bad do you want it?
You got to work the fear out of your system. Practice, prepare, face and demystify your fears step by step until it's not so scary anymore. I used to be terrified of public speaking, so I forced myself to do it every terrifying chance I got until about a year and a half later, not only had I gained some skills, but I completely overcame my fear. And I know you don't want to hear about me, we're here talking about Alex, he freed solo the El Capitan, but that's the point. The confidence building techniques you see in Alex are applicable to the more mundane as well. And this is the second technique to increase your confidence, which is to work the fear out of your system. Accent on work. It's not a moment when you suddenly stop being afraid, it's a process.
Think the problem, visualize your steps, conceptualize the possibilities, and don't be afraid to think of the bad ones too.
So sometime visualizing the actual mechanics of what would happen if my foot slipped or something, you're like, you know, I imagine a lot like, oh, if my left foot slipped, I'd probably pinwheel off the wall, I'd rotate to the left, I'd bounce off the ledge below, I'd maybe hit this other ledge that's 150 meters lower, but then either way I'm going to die.
It is essential to have a mental model of the problem, the project, the mission, understand the key parameters, the risks, your relative strengths and weaknesses, a roadmap for working through it. This allows you to learn. This is how you judge if something is getting better or not. Visualization is the act of imagining a particular move, a specific technique, something you'll do, something you'll say. Just imagine it visually playing out, like practicing in a simulation in your brain. Journaling is also a massively underrated tool. Writing things down, how the day went, what went well, what not, what you learned, how you felt. It just helps you clarify your thoughts with the added advantage of being able to read it later and remember how far you came. So I'm going to put these three, conceptualize, visualize, and journal, together as the third technique to increase your confidence.
Goals are good, but goal fixation is not.
Look at them geeking out over the joy of feeling good on the rock, of having well-planted feet.
My footwork gets really good.
Yeah, really. Yeah, totally.
And here's Alex analyzing the steps for a difficult sequence.
You've got your right hand on a crimp, left hand on a side pull, and then you put your right foot onto this dimple thing. Right hand goes up to a small down pulling crimp. Left foot goes into a little dish.
These are great examples of process orientation, which is about focusing on the work, the journey, the quality of what you're doing, the continuous improvement, more than on the final outcome. The final outcome is ultimately out of your control, to some degree at least. A year before his successful El Capitan free solo, Alex had an abandoned attempt. It just didn't feel right, and the weather wasn't great either.
Hey, whoever's on the radio, this is Alex. I think I'm bailing.
It stung, sure, but he didn't despair. He returned to training, back to work, and that's really the best thing you can do. Build a better self, and the goals will follow. And this is our fourth confidence building technique.
Now this one I particularly like. It just hits me in the feels right here.
So I actually don't really think that I combat fear with an emotion. I think that if anything, if I'm trying to work with fear, I mean, one sort of trick is to sort of reframe it as excitement. You know, you take sort of fear or nervousness or whatever, and you just sort of shift it a little bit in your head to, oh, I'm so excited for this thing that I'm about to do. I mean, I certainly think that that's the case with public speaking or a lot of other things like that, where you're standing backstage and you're like, oh, I'm a little bit afraid. And then you're like, no, I'm not afraid. I'm just excited. Because honestly, they feel almost the same within your body. And so it's pretty easy just to shift mentally.
The power to not be a slave to your initial emotional reaction. I'm on a 12-hour drive to somewhere. Now, this can be a massive pain in the neck, or I could make a cool road trip out of it, camp somewhere overnight, and film something in nature. Negative emotion, positive emotion. Who decides what I feel? I do. I can shift my emotion.
And shifting the emotion is our fifth confidence building technique. Listen to your emotions, but don't be their slave.
Remember when I told you that the road to confidence is 99% preparation and just 1% on the big day, in the moment? Well, that is true. But there's a bit more to talk about this 1%.
It was a beautiful September morning, and as I climbed higher, I could hear the sounds of tourists chatting and laughing on the summit. They'd all hiked up the normal trail on the back, which I was planning on using for my descent. But between me and the summit lay a blank slab of granite. There were no cracks or edges to hold onto, just small ripples of texture up a slightly less than vertical wall. I had to trust my life to the friction between my climbing shoes and the smooth granite. I carefully balanced my way upward, shifting my weight back and forth between the small smears. But then I reached a foothold that I didn't quite trust. 2 days ago, I had just stepped right up on it, but that had been with a rope on. Now it felt too small and too slippery. I doubted that my foot would stay on if I weighted it. I considered a foot further to the side, but it seemed worse. I switched my feet and tried a foot further out. It seemed even worse. I started to panic. I could hear people laughing on the summit just above me. I wanted to be anywhere but on that slab. My mind was racing in every direction. I knew what I had to do, but I was just too afraid to do it. I just had to stand up on my right foot. And so, after what felt like an eternity, I accepted what I had to do, and I stood up on the right foot. And it didn't slip, and so I didn't die, and that move marked the end of the hardest climbing. And so I charged from there towards the summit.
The confidence to stand on that right foot, not because you are sure it will work, but because you have no choice. When you only have one option, send it. There's no alternative anyway. There's no point in having doubts anymore. That time has passed. That bridge has been crossed. You got to do it anyway, so you might as well go out with a bang. Fortunately, for most of the things we do, the cost of failure is not certain death. And this is our sixth and final technique to increase your confidence. When you've got nothing else, a leap of faith.
So this is it, the Alex Honnold approach to building your confidence. Okay, how do I get down from here?